my parents used my name to open 3 credit cards and blamed me for the debt, so I filed a police report and let them face charges. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for most of my life I thought being a good son meant sacrificing everything for my family. My parents raised me on this idea that loyalty was the highest virtue, that no matter what happened, family came first. Never turn your back on blood, my dad used to say, usually after a fight he'd started. We didn't have much growing up, an old 2-bedroom house with a roof that leaked when it rained, the hum of the fridge louder than the TV, and the constant tension of bills piled on the kitchen counter. But to my parents, appearance mattered more than anything. We might have been broke, but we looked respectable. I learned early that saying no wasn't an option. If Mom needed help with groceries, I skipped lunch to send her cash. When Dad's car broke down, I maxed out my student card to cover repairs. They made it sound noble, like I was part of something bigger, a family that sticks together. And I wanted to believe that. I really did. Even in college, while my friends were out partying or traveling, I was working double shifts at the diner to send money home. My mom would call just to remind me how proud she was, followed by, "Don't forget the electricity bill this month, okay?" It always came with a smile that hid the obligation underneath. Looking back, I think I mistook guilt for love. Every sacrifice felt like proof I was worthy of being their son. I told myself I was helping, that I was being responsible, even when my own rent was overdue. But lately, something inside me has started to crack. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe I was finally realizing that love shouldn't feel like debt collection. Still, I had no idea how far my dutiful son act would be tested, or how deep their betrayal would cut once money got involved. It started so small, I almost didn't notice it. Little comments from my mom like, "You're doing so well now, honey. Your family must come first before yourself." Or my dad saying, "We struggled our whole lives for you. You owe us a little comfort." They said it with smiles, laughter even, but underneath, it felt like a rule I couldn't break. When I landed my first real job after college, a modest IT position, it was supposed to feel like freedom. Instead, it felt like I'd been promoted to the family ATM. I remember one night vividly. Late summer, the air heavy with humidity, the buzz of a ceiling fan cutting through silence. My phone rang. Mom's voice was sweet at first. "How's my hard-working boy?" I told her about my first paycheck, proud for a second. Then she sighed and said, "Well, your dad's truck needs new tires and we're a bit short this month. You'll help, right? You're doing so well now." I hesitated, and in that moment I heard it. The tone shift, guilt dripping through the line. "After everything we've done for you, don't start acting selfish." It wasn't just money, though. It was control disguised as care. They wanted to know where I spent every dollar, who I spent time with, what my plans were. When I talked about saving for a place of my own, Dad scoffed. "You're too young for that responsibility. Focus on us." I kept telling myself this was normal, that all families leaned on each other. But sometimes when I looked at them, I realized they didn't see me as their son anymore. They saw me as a resource, and even though that realization made my stomach twist, I didn't say anything. I was too afraid of being called ungrateful, but deep down, I could feel it. They were crossing a line I wouldn't recognize until it was too late. It happened on a Thursday morning, one of those small, forgettable days that end up changing everything. I was sitting at my desk, half asleep, sipping cheap coffee when an email from a car dealership popped up. "We regret to inform you that your credit application has been denied." Denied? I blinked at the screen, confused. My credit had always been solid. I paid every bill, every loan, every cent. So, out of curiosity, I logged into my credit report. That's when my stomach dropped. There were 3 credit cards under my name that I'd never opened, all maxed out, all delinquent, with balances totaling nearly $20,000. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, maybe a mix-up with someone who shared my name. I called the credit bureau, pacing the room as the agent read through the details. Each account was verified with your full name, date of birth, and social security number. she said matter-of-factly. "Would you like to dispute the charges?" My throat went dry. "Yes, please," she continued. "The accounts were opened between 2018 and 2020, with your listed home address on the applications." That stopped me cold. 2018, 2019, 2020. I was still living with my parents back then. I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my ears. The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, like the air had been sucked out of it. I asked for the billing address and the agent confirmed. My parents' house. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. The hum of my computer, the faint sound of traffic outside, even the ticking of the clock. Everything felt distant. It didn't make sense. My parents barely used online banking. They didn't even trust mobile apps. But they had all my information, every single piece of it, and for the first time, a thought entered my head that I immediately tried to push away. What if it was them? I wanted to believe it wasn't possible, but deep down, I already knew. I drove straight to my parents' house that night, heart pounding the entire way. Every red light felt like an eternity. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sky had turned that deep blue before night fully settles. The kind of light that makes everything feel heavier. Their porch light flickered as it always did, and for a moment I almost turned back. But I needed answers. Inside, everything looked the same. The faint smell of my mom's vanilla candles, the same faded couch, the TV murmuring a news anchor's voice. My mom smiled when she saw me. "Oh, look who finally decided to visit," she said. My dad barely looked up from his chair. I didn't waste time. "Did you open credit cards in my name?" I asked. Silence. The kind that doesn't just fill a room, it crushes it. My mom blinked, feigning confusion. "What? Of course not. Why would you even ask that?" My dad's jaw tightened, his eyes darting toward her. "I found 3 accounts," I said, pulling out the printed statements I'd requested. "Under my name. Using this address." I dropped them on the coffee table. My mother picked up one, her hand trembling just slightly before she set it back down. "That's ridiculous," she said softly, but her voice cracked. My dad stood up, his face red. "We needed help, all right?" he snapped. "You've got a good job, good credit. We were drowning. You could have covered it. I could barely speak. You stole from me. We're your parents," my mom said, tears filling her eyes. "We were going to pay it off. You don't understand how hard it's been." I stared at them, the 2 people who taught me right from wrong, realizing they didn't even see what they'd done as wrong. To them, it was survival. The betrayal hit me in waves. Shame, anger, disbelief, until my voice came out barely above a whisper. "You used me." And when my father crossed his arms and said, "That's what family does. We take care of each other," I knew something inside me had snapped, but that was only the beginning of how far they'd go to protect their lie. The next few days were a blur of confusion and silence. I didn't call, and they didn't either. I thought maybe, just maybe, guilt would make them do the right thing. But instead, they did something I never expected. They went on the offensive. It started with a call from my aunt. Her voice was sharp, judgmental. "What's this I hear about you accusing your parents of theft? You should be ashamed. They've done everything for you." My stomach twisted. "They did steal from me," I said quietly. "They opened credit cards in my name," she scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Your mom said you were spending irresponsibly, and now you're blaming them. Grow up." By the weekend, everyone in the family seemed to know. My cousin texted, "Dude, why are you dragging your parents through this? You sound ungrateful." Even my younger sister, who I'd always protected, called to yell, "You're embarrassing us." "Mom's been crying non-stop," she said. I tried explaining the truth, but she hung up before I could finish. It was surreal. I was the victim, yet somehow they made me the villain. My parents had spun a perfect story, that I'd racked up debt, couldn't handle it, and was now blaming them out of shame. And everyone bought it. At work, I kept checking my phone, hoping for a single text from Mom saying she was sorry, that she'd fix it. Nothing. I couldn't sleep. The guilt they'd trained into me since childhood kept whispering, "Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you could have just let it go. But another voice, quieter, firmer, kept saying, "No, they used you." And just when I started trying to figure out how to clear my name quietly, they did something that pushed me past the point of no return. They didn't just lie to family. They tried to make it look like I had committed fraud. A week later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was firm and professional. "Mr. Taylor, this is about your outstanding balances with First Horizon and Capital One. We've been trying to reach you." My chest tightened. I explained the accounts were fraudulent, that I'd filed disputes. But then the agent said something that froze me completely. "Your parents confirmed the accounts were yours. They even provided documentation you signed." I could barely breathe. "What documentation?" I asked. She emailed copies. My signature, or at least something that looked like it, was on each one. My parents had forged my signature. That night I drove to their house again. I didn't even knock. My dad opened the door, eyes cold. "What now?" he barked. I held up the papers, shaking. "You gave my information to creditors. You forged my name." My mom jumped in before he could answer. "We didn't forge anything. We just signed for you because you were busy. We thought you'd help us pay it off later." I felt my voice crack. "You committed fraud, Mom. That's a crime." Her expression hardened. "Don't talk to me like that. You're making a big deal out of nothing. You think you're better than us now, don't you?" My dad stepped closer, towering over me. "You're not sending your own parents to jail, boy. You do that, and we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of son you really are." It was a threat, plain and simple. They wanted me silent, but it didn't end there. 2 days later, debt collectors started calling my workplace. Someone had given them my office number, the same number only my parents had. My boss pulled me aside asking if I was in some kind of trouble. I wanted to disappear. That's when the realization hit. They weren't scared of what they'd done. They were confident I wouldn't fight back. They still believed I was the obedient son, the one too afraid to defy them. They were wrong. I didn't sleep for days after that. Every time my phone rang, my stomach dropped. Debt collectors, family members, even co-workers, everyone had something to say about me, and none of it was true. I'd become the family disgrace overnight. The lies had spread so far that even people I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages like, "How could you do that to your parents?" I tried ignoring it, tried convincing myself it would fade. But the harassment only got worse. One night, around midnight, I got a voicemail from my mom. Her tone icy. "If you want to destroy this family, go ahead. Just remember, you'll regret it when we're gone." That broke me. For the first time in my life, I felt something shift from guilt to anger. I drove to their house again, shaking with adrenaline. My dad was in the living room, beer in hand, TV blaring. My mom was at the table, scrolling through her phone. "I'm done," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You forged my name, destroyed my credit, and lied to everyone. I'm not your scapegoat anymore." Dad didn't even flinch. "You wouldn't have anything without us," he muttered. "You're ungrateful." I slammed the folder of evidence on the table. Credit statements, forged forms, everything. "You think I won't do it?" "I've already spoken to the police. They'll be calling soon." My mom's eyes widened. "You can't do that," she whispered. "We're your parents. You'd put us in jail." I felt my throat tighten. "I didn't put you there. You did." For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the TV and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My dad finally said coldly, "You walk out that door, don't come back." So I did. I walked out, and for the first time, I wasn't running from guilt. I was walking toward justice. But I had no idea how ugly things were about to get once the police got involved. The police called me 3 days later. I remember the exact moment. I was sitting in my small apartment, a single light on, half a bowl of cold noodles on the counter. The officer's tone was polite but heavy. "We've reviewed your report and confirmed that the credit card applications trace back to your parents' address and IP. We'll be moving forward with an investigation." I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. These were my parents, the people who'd raised me, scolded me, and taught me to do the right thing. And now they were suspects in a fraud case against me. News traveled fast. Within a week, they knew the police had contacted them. I woke up one morning to 20 missed calls and a string of furious voicemails from my sister. "You've lost your mind. They could go to jail. How could you do this to them?" She screamed through the phone. My aunt left a voicemail, too. "If you think you're winning points by destroying your family, think again. No one will forgive you for this." My hands shook as I deleted each message. The guilt was back, gnawing at me. But it was different this time. It wasn't because I'd done something wrong. It was because I was finally doing something right for myself, and it still hurt. A week later, I learned my parents' accounts had been frozen pending the investigation. My mom texted me, "We can't pay rent because of you. Are you happy now?" My dad's message followed minutes later. "You're dead to us." I sat there staring at my phone, realizing how irreversible this all was. The family I'd spent my whole life trying to please was gone. The silence that followed was unbearable. No calls, no messages, no apologies. But beneath that silence, something else was beginning to take shape. A sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Still, I hadn't reached peace yet. That would only come after everything fell completely apart. For weeks I lived in a fog. Working, eating, sleeping, all on autopilot. My parents had stopped contacting me, but their narrative spread faster than wildfire. My relatives avoided me. Old friends messaged awkward condolences like, "I hope things work out with your family." Even my landlord, who'd heard whispers through a mutual acquaintance, asked if I was in legal trouble. The shame clung to me like a second skin. I knew I'd done the right thing, but it didn't feel right. I was alone in every sense of the word. The holidays came and went. No calls, no invitations. My apartment felt too quiet, too cold. I started sleeping on the couch because the bed felt like a reminder that no one would ever tuck me in again. No one would ever call to ask if I'd eaten. I kept replaying my mom's voicemail. "You'll regret this when we're gone." It echoed in my head until it sounded like a curse. One night I checked my bank account. Almost empty. Between legal fees, disputed debts, and damage to my credit, I was barely staying afloat. My boss had pulled me aside earlier that day to ask if I was okay, hinting that my performance was slipping. I nodded, lied, and went home feeling like a ghost of who I used to be. That was my lowest point, sitting in the dark, surrounded by silence, wondering if maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I could have handled it differently. I even hovered over their contact names on my phone, thumb trembling, ready to apologize for things I hadn't done. But I didn't call. Something inside me, small but unbreakable, whispered, "You've been punished enough for their mistakes." I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that quiet refusal to back down, was the start of my redemption. And soon, justice would come knocking. Just not the way anyone expected. It happened on a Monday morning, the kind of day where nothing feels unusual until everything changes. I was pouring coffee when I got the call from the detective assigned to my case. His voice was steady, professional. "We've concluded our investigation. The evidence is sufficient. Your parents will be facing charges for identity theft and fraud." I froze. Even though I'd expected it, hearing those words felt like being punched in the chest. He explained that bank surveillance footage showed my father signing documents using my information, and email records tied the credit applications to their home network. It was airtight. There was no denying it anymore. A week later, I received the court summons. Walking into that courthouse felt surreal. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, the fluorescent lights too bright. My parents sat across the room, both dressed neatly, like they were trying to perform innocence. My mom's eyes darted toward me once, filled with tears that weren't entirely real. My dad didn't look up at all. When the evidence was presented, the forged signatures, the application timestamps, the matching IP addresses, I watched their faces crumble. My father tried to argue it was a misunderstanding, that they'd only been trying to help the family. The judge's tone was icy when she said, "Using someone's identity without consent is not help. It's a crime." Hearing those words should have felt like victory. But it didn't. It felt like mourning. Mourning the illusion that I still had parents who loved me the way I'd always believed. When the session ended, I walked out before they could speak to me. My sister waited in the hallway, eyes red. "You really went through with it," she said. I nodded. "I didn't want this," I whispered. But they left me no choice. That night, I sat in my car outside the courthouse watching rain streak down the windshield, realizing that justice had come, but peace was still miles away. And then, unexpectedly, something happened that cracked the silence wide open. A week after the hearing, my sister showed up at my apartment unannounced. I hadn't spoken to her since everything went down, so seeing her standing there on my doorstep, hair messy, eyes red, clutching a folder, hit me like a punch of nostalgia and dread all at once. She didn't say much at first, just, "Can I come in?" We sat at the small kitchen table I'd bought secondhand, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound between us. Finally, she said, "I found something in Mom's desk." Her voice trembled. She slid the folder toward me. Inside were letters, receipts, and copies of emails between my parents and the credit companies, all written before I even started my first job. My dad had planned to use my clean credit years in advance. There were even notes about applying for higher limits once I got stable income. My stomach turned. "They planned it?" I asked quietly. She nodded, eyes glistening. I didn't want to believe it either. I thought they'd just made a mistake. But they knew exactly what they were doing. We sat there in silence, and for the first time in months, I saw that my sister wasn't my enemy. She was just another person caught in their web. She wiped her tears and said, "I'm sorry for not believing you. They told me you were trying to ruin them." I took a long breath, the anger dissolving into something heavier, grief mixed with relief. "You don't have to apologize," I said. "You were protecting the people who were supposed to protect us." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "What will you do now?" I looked out the window at the faint glow of city lights. "Move forward," I said quietly. Without them, it wasn't vengeance anymore. It was release. But as I watched her leave, I realized something else. I hadn't just lost my parents. I'd lost the version of myself who still believed their love was real, and somehow that loss felt like freedom. It's been almost a year since the court case ended. My parents were sentenced to probation and restitution, which meant they'd have to pay back what they stole, slowly, painfully, and officially. I haven't spoken to them since the day of the hearing. Sometimes I still see their names pop up in my phone's contact list when I scroll too far, but I've never once called. The silence used to ache. Now it feels like peace. I rebuilt everything from the ground up. It wasn't easy. My credit took months to repair, my trust in people even longer. But I found a new apartment, started therapy, and got promoted at work. My co-workers know bits and pieces of what happened, but I never tell the full story. Not because I'm ashamed anymore, but because I've realized some pain doesn't need to be shared. It just needs to be understood. Sometimes I walk past families at restaurants, laughing and teasing each other, and I feel that old sting of envy. Then I remind myself, love without respect isn't love. It's control. My parents never understood that. They mistook obedience for devotion, guilt for gratitude. And for years, I did too. A few weeks ago, my sister visited again. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about her new job, her apartment, the little bits of normal life. When she left, she hugged me for the first time in years and said, "You did the right thing." It was simple, but it landed like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I still have the folder she gave me, the one that proved everything. I keep it tucked in a drawer, not as revenge, but as a reminder of who I used to be. I used to think loyalty meant staying, no matter how much it hurt. But now, I know better. Loyalty without boundaries isn't love. It's a prison, and I finally set myself free.